So, welcome, Internet. I'm sure nobody is out there yet, except for maybe like one person who follows the channel religiously, and thank you for whoever you are. This is the triumvirate edition of the Mattriarchy. We've got myself, Matt Reese from Western Nebraska, coming at you. As our typical co-host, all the way out east, there is Matt McGibson.
I want popcorn again.
Oh, okay, that's cool. And joining with us in our third chair, so to speak, the virtual third chair, is Matt Svilar, who is also out eastward.
Hey, how's it going?
So, for those of you guys out where it's like 9:30, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, what part of the world are you from, Matt?
I'm probably about 40 or 50 minutes south of you. So yeah, right.
Oh, in Baltimore?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm in DC.
Huh. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about, apparently, you're off Twitter for one day, or for 2 days now. I'm just taking a little break. And there's a Avengers Infinity War Endgame trailer that I missed.
Yeah.
Did either of you see it?
Yeah, I did watch it. And I was going to talk about it after I got this link shared, but like I said, I'm moving slow today. My goodness sakes. I am 1 second. Okay, hang on. It's the best radio in the world when you hear a 40-year-old man humming and hawing about what he hasn't gotten done yet. I can just imagine if anyone is there listening right now, they're cursing me for being a boomer. But I'm telling you, people, honestly, I'm like 14 years too young for that. Probably more like 15 years, but I'm firmly within Generation X.
Yeah,
so
Carl has just
don't blame it. Don't blame it on the boomers. Blame it on me.
Blame it on the what is your generation? Is that Gen X? I never really learned.
I am firmly within Gen X.
I am a loathsome millennial. So
see, I'm not old enough to be like. I was told that I think I'm just young enough not to be a millennial.
Yeah, you would count as a Gen Z.
So, Z. No, yeah, okay, it was Gen Z, Z.
Yeah, I like to go with the Canadian for that because Z sounds funny to me when you say it just by itself.
I don't know. I like Z. It's like Dragon Ball Z.
Well, maybe that's why I dislike it. I dislike Dragon Ball Z, so maybe that's part of my subconscious on that.
Well, now I'm thinking about like, does Nacho call it Dragon Ball Z?
Yeah, he does. It's a British Canadian usage.
Yeah, just found all my dad was digging through the Bob and Doug McKenzie stuff. I love that when they'd have like the little thing at the end, and it like they had the text that would scroll down the screen, and it would end with "eh."
Eh?
Yeah.
That's a stereotype Canadian thing, eh?
Yeah.
Nervous tick filler kind of thing.
Well, now I'm thinking about pancakes. Like for Lent, I've given up a lot of sweet foods, so I have been off soda and different desserts and such. Like I think I allowed myself to have some apple pie today, but I don't really consider that in the same ballpark as like ice cream or milkshakes. But it's been rough. I've lasted about a week so far, and the times have been tough.
That's solid though.
Being a Protestant, I feel a lot less stressed to pay attention to Lent. But I have in the past participated, and it is one of those things where whatever it is that you're chosen, sacrifice. For me, I've never realized how much I've depended on X, Y, and Z. And then when I go to when I've been doing the whole thing, you're in the middle of it, and you're reflexively getting the candy bar or the chips or whatever. And you're like, wait a second, I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, I know.
Do whatever the thing is for me anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty easy being religiously ambiguous, I guess. So no types.
He's actually a cultist. Keep your eye on him.
What is the nature of your cult then, Matt?
Open to whatever.
The cult of whatever.
The cult of whatever.
Yep.
The cult of indifference.
That reminds me of an album of a very Gen X album by Ben Folds 5. But that's a whole that's That's dating myself a little bit. So, Matt Svilar, you were the first time you've been on the show, and our typical format is that we'll just get to know each other a little bit, talk about folks' interests and drives and all that kind of stuff, and then also spend a little bit of time just seeing where things go. But you've never been with us before, so why don't you take a little bit of a minute and just kind of tell us about how you got into comics?
All right. So I got into comics pretty early in life. My dad was actually a grad school student when I was little, and he would take me to the comic book store. And so I just like kind of remember that smell that you have, and that's always kind of been something nostalgic to me. And so, through the years, superheroes probably meant a little bit more to me than most. Growing up, from a relatively early age, watching, the '89 Batman and reading comics, and playing with action figures. And so, growing up, I've always really been into the movies. I've loved to watch everything kind of come to life, and that's why it was pretty awesome when the 2007 or 2008 Iron Man came out, and then Marvel's since really kind of picked it up from there. And I've just kind of, for a while, I'd kind of dropped off, and then I kind of came back and I started reading some of the old classic trade paperbacks, and then I started getting into it again. And then I had actually found Diversity in Comics probably only around 20 videos at the time, and that kind of kind of re-energized me and kicked me back into buying comics regularly. And then it wasn't until as the I guess a year and a half or so, or 2 years has gone by, that the comics book pros have since turned me off to buying comics anymore. So so I'm still at this point in time, more or less purchasing the Comicsgate stuff, but otherwise not too much of the mainstream. Other than, of course, I'm really into Sean Gordon Murphy. Whatever he puts out, I'm reading.
That guy's skill level is so freaking. I can't even put words to it. It's amazing.
Yeah, he and then just yesterday he was putting out stuff. He did a Q&A, and someone made a comment about how he doesn't kind of stick to one side in terms of politics, in terms of White Knight. He kind of stuck within that ground of a little bit of a balance of dealing with an issue but showing both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
And he kind of said hey, I'm not going to fall to some of my more leftist friends want me to be on the side. He's like, but I just don't think it's all that interesting. And I think he's 100% correct.
Well, man, I was see, when they first started talking about White Knight, I remember rolling my eyes at the concept, because they used to have this little interview piece at the back of a lot of DC books, and it would say, I always wondered what Gotham City would look like if it had some more modern issues like racial inequality or the pay gap. And I was just like, oh, geez, it's going to be one of these. Sure. And to my surprise, it was kind of the opposite. It was fair and impartial. And I haven't read a lot of it myself. I've seen bits and pieces from reviews and such, and it definitely looks really cool and not much like what I was expecting, especially with how that interview kind of came off to me.
Well, and one of the things about White Knight that I think is most commendable about it is that, and it seems it's when I was growing up reading comics in the '90s, right? This was not an abnormal thing. It was a very normal thing that somehow in the last 10 years got lost. It's a story that lays out its premises and is 100% consistent and honest with its premises, right? It asks questions that fit within its paradigm, and it answers those questions in an honest way. So many comics that we've seen in the last 10 years have bent their rules or have been driven by whatever agenda the creative team wants to put out there, rather than just telling a story. And that's one of the things that I think is most remarkable about it. And that's why people are finding resonance with White Knight, is because it's not, it is, all stories have points and metaphors and everything, but it's not hackneyed about it. And it's not, trying to push one thing or another. It's just talking about what are the consequences of these characters' choices and going from there.
Sure. Yeah, I just think that if you're going to delve into politics, it's much more interesting to kind of show both sides. Like I just think that that's a more interesting story than to beat someone over the head with the very basic one perspective point of view, and that's it. And especially now, it becomes it becomes predictable. You know exactly where it's going to go. Like, oh, okay, they've taken this side, and all right, fine. But whereas with White Knight, you didn't know exactly where it was going to go because they'd set it up in a place where, okay, something unexpected happens with Joker. He all of a sudden kind of turns too good, and so you're wondering what's going to happen. There's all these different kind of situations that they do bring up, like gentrification and situations like that, but you never know exactly what's going to happen next, and so it kind of keeps you reading. The art, of course, is great. I thought the dialogue and the flow of the comic was great, and I just think that Sean Gore Murphy's a pretty solid creator.
I think one of the great things about it, from the contextual side of it too, like the moving parts, was in a lot of ways it was, if the Batman from Batman the Animated Series became the Batman from the Nolan films, what would that look like?
Sure.
And I thought that was really interesting, because one of the things is Batman from the Dini-verse, right, had there's just more of and probably because it was made for for weekday afternoon kids block, but there was more restrictiveness on Bruce's personality. He had personal checks in place. He had responsibilities and duties that kept him from becoming this crazed vigilante character. And one of the great things about White Knight was you get to see Bruce dip his toe in that pond and realize the consequences of that. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Not much of a spoiler there, youngest Matt, but a little bit of one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to wait for... I don't think a trade has come out yet for it, right?
No, they released the hardcover last fall under the Black Label, I think.
Which
I felt like it was still going, but then again, I also feel like it's still mid-2018. Like, time hasn't caught up with me yet.
Yeah, that's if it were mid-2018, you would be correct, but it's not, so you're not.
All right, well, I guess I'll be getting around to it eventually. I think I usually go for soft covers just because it's a little cheaper. It can actually vary. It can be a lot cheaper most of the time.
Yeah, that's usually what I go with.
Now, I wanted to ask either of you, because this actually helps me a lot with my experience with finding comics that I wouldn't really have tried otherwise, is my local comic shop does a deal where if you turn a book into them and you just lightly read it, like you just barely touched it, they'll sell it for half off. So a lot of people, like I just go in there and I find the secondhand books. There's a ton of great stuff there most of the time. Like sometimes there's nothing worth mentioning, and other times there's a lot of really good stuff to the point that even half off, you're going to bleed yourself all the money out of your wallet. But do either of you have that kind of luxury?
No.
See, that's just, to me, I think that's just one of the best things that my local comic shop does is offer 50% off. And I got a lot of really good Hellboy, some classic Green Lantern material from the 80s, just a lot of really cool stuff that I got for half off.
So my local comic shop, it's kind of a funny story. So it used to be part of a branch of an antiques shop that had comics, and one of the guys who worked there was also into the trading card games. And the antique store decided to close down their branch that had the comics and the trading card games because it wasn't quite generating the profit they wanted to out of it. So the fellow who brought in the trading cards bought out all of the stock to start his own little shop. And he and some friends of his, they were able to make some money with the trading cards. But at the time, there was a real depression locally for comics. This was before they were still on, some comics were still in the newsstand here. Not a lot, but a few of them were. And so there wasn't a huge market for comics in our little town. And but they had all these back issues, right? They had years of back issues from when the antique store had them. And a couple of years later, they start selling out of some of these back issues. People start coming in, and I was one of the people who started rummaging through the back issues at discount. and pretty soon people are asking about new books, and so they just in the last year started carrying new books again. But they still have a bunch of their old back issues, and some of them you can get 6 books for $5, so from the old stuff. So every once in a while I'll go in there and I'll put down $6 or $5 and walk out of there with 6 like old floppies from the mid 90s, mid 80s to mid 90s, and who knows what I'm gonna get. But
yeah, I definitely envy that. Both shops. There's only 2 shops in DC, and they're both kind of like the corporate-owned ones. So there are no back issues whatsoever. It's just all of the leftover crap that came from like a couple months before.
Now this is a weird question. So I've been to DC a few times, and one time I was down there. I had a week an afternoon off. So there used to be a shop down in Georgetown that had a decent selection of back issues. Is that just not there anymore?
Not that I know of.
That's too bad.
Yeah. Now it's kind of the college kid hangout spot where if I asked for a Jawbreakers, I'd be probably screamed at and told to leave immediately. So so I'll go to go pick up a few things here and there, but unfortunately no floppies. But there is a place actually in Wheaton, Maryland, old school, just tons of long boxes in the back of old comics, and I did actually found a Cyber Frog there randomly. Like,
wow.
The store owner looked at me. I was like, "Do you guys have any Cyber Frog in any of your old floppies?" And he looked at me like, I haven't heard that in a long time. And then he checked, and he actually ended up finding I think a Cyber Frog #3 or something.
Wow, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, no, that's like the fun part.
Yeah.
It's awesome to go and then hunt. And so personally, I collect kind of the old 90s X-Force, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men books, New Mutants. And it's fun to just go to places that actually do have some of the old issues and just kind of dig and see if you can find anything that you don't have.
Yeah, I agree. The search is a big part of it. I love finding the random stuff that doesn't seem to fit anywhere, and finding old series that you didn't know existed, and you're like, I gotta pick up all of this.
Yeah.
Because it's just suddenly something off the beaten path that it's kind of like your thing.
Yeah. That's what's kind of fun looking at when I look back at the old comics that I had growing up. They're just a hodgepodge of random things that I'd picked up, and they're usually pretty interesting.
Now, have you ever actually been to Third Eye Comics in Maryland?
I've not.
It's a massive store. It's actually, I think, the biggest. It's the biggest comic store shop in the state, but it's I've described it as a small convention. They have tons of statues, tons of figurines.
Oh, awesome.
One wall is covered with new issues from just about everything under the sun, and the other wall is covered in different trades and hardcovers.
Where in Maryland is it?
I believe it's for some reason it's definitely not Annapolis. It's what's that place? It starts with an E. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Ellicott City?
Ellicott, yes, it's in Ellicott.
Gotcha. Definitely have to try it out.
Yeah, it's really cool. The punk music can get on your ears a little bit, but if you tune it out, you're in a really great store.
Sure.
Punk rock and comic book store. That seems like a perfect fit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I went there for my birthday. I even took some pictures of it and put it on Twitter. But I really enjoyed it. It's a really cool place.
So, Matt, you this is Middle Matt. Is that
Middle Matt, Little Matt, and Old Matt?
There you go.
There you go.
So, are you involved in any creative ventures, writing, drawing, any of that kind of stuff?
Just on my own, just as a kind of a little hobby thing, but otherwise not so much. And I kind of jumped back into it recently. For a while actually, before getting into all this comic stuff, comics Twitter, YouTube, and all that stuff, I run 5 days a week, and for a while I started kind of thinking about an idea, trying to figure out. For some reason, I wanted to figure out a concept for a comic. And so, you know, unfortunately, I'm like very meticulous. I like getting all my information, figuring out how to do something before I do it. So I've started to like study up on some of the storytelling, you know, reading some books, and then I've been recently taking some like online drawing classes just to get back into it. Something I used to do all the time, you know, up until about high school. So you know, I think it's interesting. Like this whole community kind of, I think, has kind of gotten everybody's creative juices flowing a little bit. You know, you all have, you've all got ideas and stuff, and it's kind of allowed that access to be able to actually execute on something. And so, you know, I think you can't help but be a little bit, you know, jacked up on that.
It gets the inner kid in you working again.
Yeah.
One thing is the community and also the finance. Like you see that one guy makes $1 million on one book, and you're like, holy cow. You know, and Ethan Van Sciver's talked a lot about how that's, I believe at one point when the book was at 400,000, he said it was several times his regular salary.
Sure.
So I'm going to imagine that this is, because like I always make a rough estimate because, you know, people don't like to talk about their salaries. I'd kind of imagine that Ethan was making about like maybe 100K at DC.
Yeah. Based on like what he's commented on, it seems, I think he has said that he was making six figures, but I think, yeah, it's probably around that.
Yeah, and then so I'd imagine that he's at the very least, I know a lot of it's going to go to shipping and taxes and stuff, but you know, he's generated $1 million now.
Yep.
It's amazing. I'm actually going to be right back. I'm going to get a drink of water, but Barry is in the chat. He wants to ask about, or he was asking about what everyone thought about the new Avengers trailer, and I'll let you guys talk about that while I go get some water because I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Well, Matt, you should go ahead and like get on your phone and check it out because it is definitely worth watching. So, Svilar, what was your take on the trailer? I'd like to hear that.
So, I actually liked the beginning. I think it does me. I don't know, when I watched Civil War or any of those things, I just kind of get jacked up. I feel like I'm emotionally invested. Like they've got me hooked in terms of the whole MCU. So I like the beginning. Obviously, the end wasn't my favorite. Not a huge fan of Captain Marvel, but otherwise, you know, I thought it was pretty good at creating some drama, trying to show you the stakes of what's going on. You know, it's pretty serious. Because I think that was one of the interesting things that turned a lot of people off about Infinity Wars was that they were still joking around and stuff. But I actually think in some ways that was done on purpose due to the fact that this whole time they're kicking everybody's ass. They always succeed. But, you know, finally something comes and, you know, punches them right in the mouth. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, shit, this is real. And so now all of a sudden, I think, like, due to the fact that, you know, half the population is gone, they're starting to actually understand and feel, you know, what was the, you know, what the situation is. And so I think it did give that, you know, with the kind of gray tones and kind of slow build. So I actually like that. And, you know, but otherwise, like, it wasn't anything huge. It wasn't, I think one of the Civil War trailers or even like the Black Panther trailer, I think really got me going. And I love those. It wasn't like up there, but I thought it was relatively good at kind of conveying the information I think it was probably trying to.
Yeah, I mean, it was a well put together trailer. I'm not going to argue with that at all.
They almost are, other than Captain Marvel.
Well, yeah. Well, it wasn't even that like killed it for me. I just couldn't I couldn't figure out watching it. Like I'm sitting there and you and I've never talked about this before, so I'll let you know an open secret. Like,
sure.
I don't appreciate things like normal people. There's something with my wiring. I analyze and break everything I see down, right?
Sure.
So I don't sit there and watch a movie typically and just get into it. Now I'll cry at that stuff and I do get emotionally invested in it, but I still pick all the pieces apart, right?
Yep.
So typically if I don't like something, I can make a snap judgment about liking or not liking a thing and then be able to explain why I do or don't like it.
Sure.
This is weird for me because with this trailer, the first time I saw it, I couldn't understand why I didn't care at all. Right? I was between apathetic and distasteful of the entire thing, but none of the pieces were bad. The music was good, the pacing was good. It laid the groundwork for why the hell you should care. but I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to watch this.
Wow.
You know,
So do you think you're just fatigued?
I don't think it's fatigue because, like, okay, one of the things, like, just recently, and Barry's in the chat. He'll talk. He can talk. You can ask him about this. Barry is a huge Alita fan, right? And he loves him some Japanese stuff. And so when they announced that Alita was finally going to film after all of these decades and after everything else, Cameron says the technology is finally where we want it. We're going to do this movie. Barry starts talking to me about it, and I'm just like, I've not really seen it. I'm not really up on it. He's like, but you've heard of it, right? I said, of course I've heard of it. I grew up, in the 90s. I'm fully aware that it existed. She's like, okay, it's going to be great. And I was like, okay. I saw it. Oh, the trailers leading up to it and everything, and I'm like, I'm interested to see this. I saw Alita. It's everything a heroin movie should be. It's so amazing. I love it.
Yep.
I don't think a drug is named heroin kind of throws it off for him, or because it's such a good term because it's a female hero. But now that it's got the name with the drug, or now it's had the name of a drug, so it's thrown everything for a loop in my brain.
Oh, Matt, come on. Okay,
anyway. Just immature.
Yes, that's it. Anyway, so I don't think it's superhero fatigue. I think it's just that, like, I don't believe that, like, Marvel Studios is going to be honest, right? Yeah. It's like and I couldn't put my finger on it. I watched Professor Geek's reaction video after I saw the trailer, and one of the things he talked about, because I was just unsettled with it, so I watched some other people's reaction videos, and one of the things he talked about was that when he first saw the Captain Marvel beeper at the end of Endgame, right, is that he was like, okay, I trust them so far. I'll keep trusting them with this. And I felt the same way, right?
Yeah.
Something in the last year, and I don't know if it's just like the way Disney's treated the Star Wars fans after they didn't show up to Solo. I don't know if it's all of the nonsense that Brie Larson on the press tour. I don't know what it is, but just the fact that she's in this movie makes me not trust the entire process.
Yeah.
And I don't care how Endgame ends. I mean, I just don't. I will probably watch it on video, but I can't imagine putting down money on the counter and going into the theater for it. I just can't anymore.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it's not like, I mean, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think I'm at the point where I'm willing to watch this one. I'm willing to have them prove to me that they are all in on the Captain Marvel being the best of the best, that kind of trope now of you don't have to try, you just are the best, and so you kick everyone's ass. So I'm willing to let them prove to me that that's where they're going and that's how they're going to handle these films. And then I think the next trailer after Endgame will, I'll be done. But I'm willing to give them a shot. Yeah. I'm willing, because there are the rumors that there's like two endings up for grabs, like whether it's the people who've been creating these movies for the past 10 years, who've earned it, defeating Thanos, or it's Captain Marvel here to save the day, and thank God for her.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see Captain Marvel?
No.
Yeah, I have negative interest in seeing that picture.
Yeah.
It's like a number of years ago when Jonah Hex was in the theater, my brother, who knows I'm a big Jonah Hex fan, he said, "You want to go see this?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Come on, it'll be fun." And I was like, "I can't imagine a world in which that's fun."
Yeah.
And I said, "You'd have to pay me to go." And Mark's like, "I'll buy your ticket." And I was like, "No, okay, look, I'm going to rescind that statement because I don't really mean it. I don't want to watch this movie."
I didn't even know there was a Jonah Hex movie.
Yeah, it's Josh Brolin in it. The casting was good, but it was Jonah Hex like as a supernatural Avenger instead of Jonah Hex as just a grizzled old Civil War vet. Jonah Hex ought to be just a disfigured man with no name. I mean, it's basically the same trope as Clint Eastwood in the fist full of dollars. Or Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's that character. It's just it's a little less mysterious, and he's just, he deals with being disfigured, but it's the same kind of story. But they played on this whole supernatural angle that was used in like one miniseries in the 90s that like nobody bought because it wasn't very good, and they made a movie out of it. So I didn't see it.
Yeah, speaking of movies coming up, I am looking forward to Shazam, although I'm not looking forward to going to 2 different movies this month or next month. I don't know. To me, the movies, I try to keep it down to like 1 per month, but I want to see both Endgame and Shazam in theaters.
Yeah, I'll probably see both too. Yeah. I'm also interested in Shazam. I think it looks fun, and I hope it's solid.
I've been a pretty big Zach Levy fan since Chuck, so
sure.
I would have to. I'm probably on hook to see that one, even if I didn't think it looked good. But
I forgot that was him.
Yeah,
I forgot that was Chuck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, he looks 10, 15 years older now because he is. So there's that. The other side of it too, though, is my one hesitancy with the movie is I really want to see him grow into using the wisdom of Solomon, and if he doesn't by the end of the picture, I'm going to be pretty disappointed. But it looks like it's going to be a pretty fun time.
Yeah, I think they've kind of hit the tone relatively well. At least that's what the trailers depict. It feels like, hey, this is a kid who's got the superpowers, like almost equivalent of Superman. Just kind of having a good time and doing whatever he can do, and kind of being a little bit immature about it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think is really great about it, and there are some diehard Shazam fans that are kind of balking at it. The Captain Marvel in the comics, this is DC's Fawcett's Captain Marvel, right? It was always like super goody two shoes right out the gate, and it was his clarity of purpose that made him worthy to be the shield bearer, right? And I agree with that in a lot of ways, but I think that clarity of moral purpose is something that can take a little bit of time to develop.
Yeah.
That, especially if you look at the context from the show, seems to be that he's somebody who's been knocked around enough by life that he's gotten a little cynical, and having the chance to look past cynicism into idealism because suddenly the ideal happened. I think that's a powerful story in itself, and I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm kind of mixed myself on how I feel about the New 52 approach to Shazam versus pretty much anything prior, because there were a lot of series even in between Crisis and Flashpoint that were pretty happy. Like, I mean, he was happy. Like, everything was taken away from him. Like, he's an orphan. He's just bad thing after bad thing, but he's always so happy about things, and that was like a trend that carried all the way to New 52.
Yeah, I don't think that's an abandoned thing. We're looking at a 2-hour movie. I mean, there's room for lots of people to find themselves again in that sort of a setting. And one thing is, if I was to point anything downside to Jeff Johns' writing style, is I think he tends to lean heavily on personal tragedy as a motivator, right? Yeah. And I think that you can tell equally good stories without personal tragedy being the motivator for a particular set of characters. That's my biggest problem with the current iteration of Barry Allen, right? Is that personal tragedy is his motivator for being a cop. It's his motivator for excelling. It's his motivator for being a superhero. And before the 90s television series, right? Personal tragedy was never one of Barry Allen's motives. Barry Allen's motives for being the Flash well, first for being a police cop, or that was the right thing to do, right? He was just, that was what he believed in, and that's what he did. And then in different stories, personal tragedy may or may not have been a factor for a particular story arc, but that wasn't his reason for being. In the 90s series, I don't know if you guys saw that with John Wesley Shipp, right? Barry is a cop, but he does suffer a personal tragedy that causes him to take it to the next level, right? Goes from being a police investigator to actively investigating crimes, from being a forensic investigator, I should say, to actively investigating crimes and putting on the suit and all that kind of stuff. But him maintaining his superhero identity was not about personal tragedy. It was the fact that, well, now he can run super fast and whatever else. It was just the motive for a particular story. When they brought Barry back from the dead and rewrote his history so that his mother had a personal tragedy, was his personal tragedy, that's why he's a cop. That's why he's a superhero. That's why everything. And it's, for me as a reader, and maybe this is me being a fogey, right? But for me as a reader, it making him a bargain basement Batman doesn't help me appreciate the Flash anymore.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like he's bargain bin Batman, because they feel I don't know, to me, when I think of Batman type characters, like, they always have to be so rooted in personal tragedy that it can kind of come off as annoying if it's not played right.
Mm-hmm.
And with him, he definitely has personal tragedy, and I do think they emphasize it a little too much, but I also feel like he still has his identity of the quintessential 60s superhero, because he pretty much, he defined the Silver Age. He was the one who kickstarted it.
Yeah.
And he kind of comes off that way from himself to his attitude on life to his rogues gallery. I mean, some of these things, are straight out of the 60s, like Captain Cold, Weather Wizard, the Trickster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of Flash's charm, is that he's always come off to me as the ultimate time capsule of the Silver Age.
Well, and he was very much that, prior to being brought back from the dead. Part of my take on it, and this is definitely me being a fogey, but a big part of my take on it is, I think that when they reverted from telling Wally stories to telling Barry stories again, to rewriting history to tell the Barry stories over again, that it just was like, instead of moving forward, they're just, and not being anchored in the past, they just want to replay the past, and that just bugs me. I really enjoyed seeing Wally, as a dad. I thought those were fun stories. I liked seeing these characters grow up a little bit, and I didn't care for them just kind of, just retreading the same ground all over again. But
yeah, it seems like it might have been a little bit more of a kind of business decision. Like, oh, let's go back and get people jacked up on the old stuff.
Yeah. And for my money, if they want to do that, they just, re-release the old books,
Yeah.
I mean, Carmine Infantino's art still holds up today. In fact, it's been probably 2 years ago, I wrote a review of an old issue of Star Wars that he had drawn in the late 70s. And my goodness, it's just so good. His art was just so dynamic on that. Guy was a genius in his field.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of you are super familiar with Carmine Infantino, but if you're not, go look him up.
I'm gonna go Google him. So Carmine Infantino.
Yeah, he was the original artist for the Golden Age Flash. He did a bunch of stuff for Marvel and DC. Marvel's Star Wars line. He did a lot of those in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, I'm seeing this. Oh yeah, oh wow, he's got quite the legacy.
Yeah. And like he's a name that, like, if you read comics, in my opinion, he's on the short list of people you should know about. Right? Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, the Simon and Schuster. Obviously, but Got a lot of those guys from the Golden Age. I'm not going to dismiss any of those guys, but man, Carmine Infantino stuff is so distinct, and it is dynamic. I mean, I've never seen anybody draw action that looks as dynamic and as equally as concrete as him.
So what's your take on kind of art styles having to like push forward? Like, do you think that like it's possible for somebody to go back and do kind of a little bit more retro style, and that be okay? Or do you think it needs to continue to kind of like reinvent itself and continue to change? Because that seems to be like, that gets, I think, pushback in some sense, you know, when people, especially like right now, obviously the 90s is getting, a lot of people are bringing up like, hey, you know, it's when comics were fun, and, you know, comics aren't so fun anymore. But then people shit on the 90s art styles that were, you know, very exaggerated. So what do you think someone could go back and do something like that? Or do you think it needs to kind of continue to evolve and change?
Well, I honestly don't think that art evolves.
Yeah.
At least not in the truest sense. I think people can get more complex, or techniques get better, or tools get better, or they change. But I think that a lot of it comes down to that every style is the best fit for some story.
Yeah,
I'm saying so. Like even Erica Henderson, right? And I dislike her work. I don't find it appealing, right? But there are, for some people, that you know, lo-fi cartoony look may be just the story for. Well, actually, there is I'm trying to remember the artist's name, and it's going to escape me. But there was a comic that Kitchen Sink put out in the mid '90s called Naughty Bits, and it is the story, and it's not an all ages book. It's a very mature book. You might guess by the title, but it's about a washed out hippie who, or former hippie, who's grown up and is now a bitter middle-aged person, and just hates everyone and everything around her. And in the story, she's called Bitchy Bitch. And that's so the story is all about her past and what made her so broken, and her visceral, angry reaction to people around her, and sometimes funny, it's sometimes sad, it's sometimes aggravatingly, irritatingly awful, right? But also when it goes through and talks about her past and some of the trauma she's been through, it kind of makes sense why she's such a horrible, horrible person. And so it's an interesting book, and the style that it's drawn in is very much like Erica Henderson's style on Squirrel Girl, right? It's that kind of thing, and it works really, really, really well to describe this oppressive, broken, disturbed mind, right? Because this is a person who's not well and not healthy, and she revels in her lack of mental health because she feels like she's a victim of her past, right? And she feels like all of her glory days are behind her, and there's no hope in the world. And the art style mimics that perfectly, right? And so I think every art style, or virtually every art style, is the perfect fit for some story, right? And so I think if somebody had that clean, crisp, cartoony style that excuse me, that Infantino had, I think you could do a really good action story in that. In fact, if you were to draw a middle line between Bruce Timm's style, the animated series stuff, and what Josh Howard did with T-Bird and Throttle, right? Infantino's somewhere in that spectrum.
Sure.
Right? And I think that, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this. I did not have the money to put down to back that project at the time. I don't know if you guys saw any of the promotional stuff for T-Bird and Throttle. It's friggin' amazing. Now, the coloring technology is different, and they use digital colors, and that would change the the pop effect of Infantino's line work, but I think there definitely would be a market for something of that style in the modern world. You just have to find the right story to fit for it.
Yeah.
I mean, Nasser's never going to write it, but somebody will.
Yeah.
You actually see in the latest pages of Hallgrave that Carl put out. There's a Easter, or I guess like a shout out to Nasser.
Cool.
Yeah, there's you'll see. I guess you'll see it when you get around to reading it. But it's still kind of cool.
I've been busy this week and lame.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of the entire story of being in the comics hobby. Even when comics are so easy to pick up and read, especially if you take them with you someplace, it's always just, oh yeah, I'm reading that, but you never get around to it until like a while later.
Yeah, this week I had a mail call, very exciting. I got My Hero Macadamia came in the post, which made me super happy because that was hilarious. I started laughing out loud on the first page.
That was one of my favorite books that I read in 2018.
Oh my goodness, it was so funny. I'm sitting there, I'm just cracking up laughing, and my wife looks at me from across the room like I am a crazy person.
It's so much fun. Like the art style is great, and it's just like it's like a great time to read. It's one of the best.
And one of the great things about it is it's such a fair parody, right? I mean, it's like one of the things that, like, when Lim's done a couple of those Trump books, right? And there is a group of people that are, oh, you're idolizing him, the president, oh, you're just such a sycophant or whatever. And I'm like, you obviously haven't actually read the book, because it's as much of it's a fair parody.
Yeah.
There's good and bad in this, and everything's made fun of.
That's what it came off to me as. And I've told you before, or I think it was actually last week. I was a Republican conservative. I don't really care for Obama. Like, I don't think he's the Antichrist, but I didn't really care for him. I didn't really like him that much, but that's a separate issue. But what I did love absolutely 100% was Ash Williams saves Barack Obama. I thought that was hilarious, and it didn't feel like it was alienating me as someone from the other side of the aisle. It was a lot of fun to read, and they made jokes about everything. It was a great time.
I was unaware that comic existed.
It was actually made in like 2008.
Was that who put that out?
It's Ash Williams from Evil Dead.
Right.
Saving Barack Obama from a bunch of deadites.
Oh my god, I have to find this now.
Surprisingly, Army of Darkness actually has a pretty good Army of Darkness / Evil Dead has a pretty good comic book history. Like, they've gotten along with a lot of publishers. I think right now they're with Dynamite, but they published just some fun, goofy stories for Ash to embark on.
Yeah, there was I picked up one or two of the issues of it, and I need to seek out the rest of them. It was Evil Dead 2: Hitler's Revenge, and so it wasn't a sequel. It was a sequel to Evil Dead 2, as if Army of Darkness hadn't happened.
It brought him back to World War II.
No, into hell, actually, and in hell, Hitler has become a minor warlord in hell. He's so damn charismatic.
I want to find that now, because I had no idea. Like, I remember I loved Ash Williams in Space. I thought that was fun.
And so he's become a minor warlord. Hitler's become a minor warlord in hell and is convincing the demons to rise up and attack Earth. And you're like, I'll start a Fourth Reich. Darn it.
I'm gonna have to find that now.
Oh my god, yeah, it was hilarious. If you can consider Hitler funny. I mean, obviously
I tend to think that I think making, or when you make jokes about these things, like, some of it can be a little tasteless. Like, it can be funny but tasteless, and then making fun of Hitler himself, it's pretty easy and it's pretty funny, just because he's this goofy looking guy, like this thin man with a little mustache, and you're supposed to look at him and he's going to look you in the eye and say that he's genetically superior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's something I always thought was kind of funny.
No, I definitely think so. It's I think Andrew Clavin who said this, that if it wasn't for the human tragedy, um, that frailty and sin would be hilarious, because it's such a takeaway from what our potential is as humans. It's such a limiting, a breaking of that from what we could be. And if it wasn't for the tragedy, then our foibles would be hilarious. And I can't disagree with that.
Completely.
So
Just think about any other Evil Dead material that they had a crossover with Kiss recently, and I don't remember how that went.
well, I'm sure that there was that the day was saved by a rock concert. I think that's pretty much how every Kiss project ends.
Well, it's got to be how it ends. Apparently, now I wouldn't have known this as well as maybe you two would have, but when last year when it went around that Marvel was signing books with Stan Lee's blood infused with ink, and at first I was like, "That's crazy. That can't be real." And then apparently it was something that actually happened. And so apparently, and at first I was like, "Oh, is this like the first time it's ever happened?" And no, it wasn't, because apparently Kiss did that same thing back in, I think it was the late 70s.
Yeah, I think it was actually the early '80s, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different
disgusting.
circumstance, like 90-year-old Stan Lee, who had, like, with all the stuff that came out, was pretty much being abused in terms of his time and what they had doing to him, and yeah, it's a little bit different circumstance of.
I heard it was a
injected
nightmare to meet Stan in person during that time, like when they bust him to conventions and stuff like that. Like you could see that he wasn't being treated fairly, because they'd like shake him, like he's 90 something, he was 95, like they'd be shaking him awake to get to sign things for nerds.
Yeah.
And he would be sitting there just like trying to fall asleep, and then he'd be like and they'd be like, come on, you got to sign this, and he's just like he'd be much better at home being taken care of than at this event, which is not good for him.
Yeah. I never got a chance to meet Stan, and I'm actually totally okay with that, because I would hate. The guy, he deserved his piece. He should have. It would have been nice if he could have bowed out of the public spotlight after his wife passed away. I know he wanted to see people. I'm Facebook friends with the guy who's the publicity manager for Roy Thomas. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Roy, but Roy was editor-in-chief at Marvel after Stan stepped down from that position.
Okay.
And Stan was still a publisher, but he moved out west to try to sell the movie properties way back in the late 70s, early 80s. And Roy took over as editor for a spell, and he also wrote for DC and all sorts of stuff. He was kind of the first nerd, maybe not the first one, but of the first generation of people that grew up with the Golden Age books and kind of really revered them. Anyway, he's got his publicity manager manages the Roy's Facebook presence, and so they post what cons they're going to be at, and of course Roy is much younger than Stan was, but they got to see each other last summer, and Roy talked about what bad health Stan was in, and he didn't know how long it was going to be, and it wasn't much longer than that before he actually passed away, which is a bummer. But it's one of those things where it seems like if just the people that knew and his friends and his companions and stuff could be the people that saw him, that would have been better than having him puppeted across the country.
You hear comic book pros even talking about like what a drag cons are for them.
Mm-hmm.
You end up getting sick because you're meeting all these people, you're sitting there shaking hands, you're doing all this stuff, you're getting worn out. And think about that, like a 90-year-old man having to go through that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've been to several cons with our little ideal comics company, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have people coming up to the table and wanting to meet us. We just have people that, we're trying to convince them to buy our books, right? So it's a little bit different dynamic. But even that after a day is exhausting, right? It'll kick your butt. I can't imagine trying to do that. I'm 40, right? I can't imagine trying to do that at 80. It's nonsense.
Yeah, let alone 95.
I know.
See, when it comes to, I was always thinking about what I would do at a convention if I ever made it that far. If I'm just sitting there like with a book that I was reading or something when nobody's coming up, or if I'd have like a video game or something, or I'd just start listening to music. Because a lot of these pros, especially the smaller ones, they don't have the big lines. They just have people that occasionally walk over and ask questions. And that's actually, in my experience, it's the case for almost everybody. Like even big shots like Tomasi. Like I walked up to him pretty easily and got a really nice conversation about him. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the other people, like he's not faking it. Like you can tell he's genuinely happy to be there.
I can tell. I know Tomasi's a good guy. Back in my collecting rejection letter days, I got a couple of them from him. So he's a good guy.
Oh, you actually tried out, or you tried out for Marvel DC?
Oh, yeah, for DC back in the day, I had when DC for a while, DC wasn't publishing an Aquaman book, and I had a great pitch that I tried sending. And I thought it was a great pitch that I was sending around the DC offices for about a year. And Tomasi's one of the desks I sent it to because he'd been the assistant editor for Starman, and in my pitch, it was would have taken things all the way back to the golden age and kind of reinforced some stories and all kinds of stuff. So I thought, if Starman did that, then if my book does that, then Tomasi's a good person to get a start on. And he said, this pitch looks good, but I'm not the guy. So here's the guy's number. And so he was pretty cool. I'm sure he doesn't remember me at all. That's been 2004.
That's still really cool. Like, I mean, and I've actually pitched different stuff to a couple of people around the circle. I was just like, oh, would you be interested in working on this? And so far I've gotten a couple of no's back, but but they do kind of like when I do share the stuff with them, they tell me what they would change or what they like, what they don't like. So it's always helpful. Like, I feel like you can always learn from defeat,
Yeah. Or you can be Nasser and you just you overcome and hound people until they say yes.
Nasser is an interesting case. I wonder how he's doing, because there was a little bit last year, like in October, when he was really angry all the time, but he was also in a lot of drama where people would get on him. And I don't know. I can't believe, I was at 20 years old. Like, there's gonna be a point where when I turned 21, I'm like, oh, I guess I'm old enough to be called, a unflushed dumpster truck stop toilet by a man who calls himself a professional.
Yeah, part of the situation that I think Nasser found himself in, and I can't say I haven't been there either. Well, I mean, that's not true. Part of it is that he gained a lot of notoriety really fast, and that is a hard thing for anyone to deal with. From seeing some of his collaborations and the pitch work he's got in, his ideas, I'm not saying those are unmerited. That's unmerited attention, but it's a lot to deal with.
Especially at that young age, I think he was at the time he must have been finishing up college.
Yeah. And like I said, when I was his age, I was sending query letters to DC and getting rejection letters back, and Mad Magazine and Marvel and the whole thing. So like while I was getting rejections, Nasser's getting rejections and finding teams and doing his own thing. That wasn't an availability to me, at that age. And so I can't imagine if after going through that emotional swing of going from rejection to success and notoriety, and that would be a hard thing to find a middle ground to settle into.
Well, he's definitely got this structure and community now that has allowed him some of his success.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that what I think he might have learned somewhat of the wrong lesson. I think he takes it because of his persistence. It's really, I think it ended up giving him some success in getting Stardust off the ground and him having, being able to do that. But at the same time, like there's nuance. There's a little bit of a balance. You don't just sit there and hound people until they let you on, which I think is ultimately what, happened with him and Ethan, and allowing him on his channel. And then, from there, having a little bit of drama with Cecil just kind of, skyrocketed him. But I think, I don't think he learned that like that wasn't always the case, and that's not how you should always maybe handle every single situation of just hound people until they say yes. Sometimes you got to understand there's some social etiquette that's also to be taken into consideration.
I think part of it too is I think that I think one of the elements is he had so many irons in the fire, right? And I think that sometimes when you get overcommitted, you find yourself slacking on the things that you're not good at. And I can't necessarily speak for everybody here in the room, so to speak, but writing and art, there are solitary professions, and they are appealed to by solitary people. And if you are a social person who writes, then you know that the only way you ever write is by isolating yourself.
Yeah.
But many people who are naturally isolationist folks or introverts, they find an easy marriage of that lifestyle with the writer's lifestyle. But one of the difficulties that we have in the current mode of self-promotion is through social media, right?
Yeah.
And maintaining a social media profile is an exhausting and emotionally difficult work. And that's one of the challenges I think that exists in our current realm is how do you find time to be alone and to do all the stuff that you need and be the social creature that you need to sell your market.
To get yourself out there. That's taking the little break I am from Twitter right now, just because a lot of it was politics based. Like, I was just kind of sick of seeing that. And there was also this stuff, I don't know if you guys know about who Miss Jazz DeFunk is, or her husband, John the Hillbilly.
No.
They're both Christian cartoonists on Twitter. But, and they were under a fire because they made some really, honestly, kind of tame, Catholic, or not Catholic, classical Christian responses to LGBT things, where they just said, oh, I think it's a sin, but I still love the people anyway.
Yeah.
Or, and then it's only really, but, to those people, it would only really be a sin if they believed it in the first place. I don't know. Like, I've always felt like but anyway, they got attacked for it. The one, or Miss Jazz, who actually just recently got freelance work on SpongeBob. They're putting these tweets of hers out there that are really tame about LGBT things. She's got different people in the comic community saying, "Oh, I don't want to associate with you," or not the cartoon community, like the mainstream on Cartoon Network cartoon community, saying, "Yeah, I blocked both of them. I can't believe I ever talked to them in the first place." Disgusting things like that, or things along those lines. Really, it's like, "Oh, I'm removing them from my friends list at once," and it just got to me. Like, I was like, is that how petty these people can be? They're trying to ruin this like pretty innocent woman's life and the life of her husband.
Yeah.
And then I saw more stuff about politics, and then that was just, I don't know, politics is just stupid all around. But I just kind of got sick of it, so I said I was going to take a couple days break. I'm not. The reason I'm taking a break and not getting rid of Twitter is because it's kind of important to building yourself. Although Carl has told me that Instagram is actually really good as well for building yourself as an artist.
Mm.
Well, it's a visual medium, so I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, if it weren't for the people that I've met through Twitter and the opportunities it presents, F this website, I'd never use it.
Yeah, I avoided Twitter out for a long time, and I had friends who were on it, and they're like, you should check it out because there's hilarious stuff and whatever else.
Every once in a while, most of the time it's either funny because it's horrendously stupid, or it's funny because someone says something silly like the real reason to be mad at Abacus Mike is because he is not an abacus.
That is a real reason. But no, seriously though, I had like one of my buddies used to follow Mike Nelson when he was on Twitter, and he would just crack jokes over Twitter like all the time, and they were and but he's off Twitter now because he doesn't want to deal with it, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But I just avoided it for a long time, and what happened was I ended up having a few friends from back in the day in the message board days in the webcomic community, because I've been making webcomics since 2006, right? So I had a bunch of friends from the old Comic Genesis days that I just kind of lost touch with. And when I went to go find them, they, their email addresses had been canceled, or they stopped checking their Facebook, or I found just a handful of people whose only interaction on the internet was over Twitter. And I was just like, well, there was one, then there was two, then there was, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. There are a ton of people who are like pretty much exclusively Twitter presence, or have an exclusive Twitter presence, so they don't have it on YouTube, or they don't have it on I don't know, anywhere. The other thing I really do like about Twitter is, for the most part, like some people don't do this at all, but a lot of guys in our circle and a little bit above that too will have like open DMs. So you can just send them a message, and in my experience, a lot of them are pretty good at getting back to it.
Yeah, which has been nice. It allows our little show to punch above its weight sometimes. So.
Yeah, sometimes a little too big, but I don't know. I just think it's really cool, especially when I can get somebody like our guest for next week.
So is it next week or 2 weeks?
Let me see. It should be next week. Yep, next week, 21st. Really excited about that one.
Well, cool. So do we have him for first hour or second hour? Did we talk about that? I forget.
I think it's first hour, and I might only be able to keep him for first hour.
So all of you guys in the chat, sorry for the inside business, but Matt's been off Twitter for 2 days, and so I haven't been able to get a hold of him.
You can send emails, but I think sometimes when it comes to me, you might be better off just using the U.S. Postal Service and sending me letters.
I know. So Svilar, when I got your confirmation that you were going to come on this week, I went ahead and sat Matt an email, and he was just like, "Oh my God, I wasn't even going to check this. I'm so glad I did."
Yeah, I'm glad I got the message. I was a little nervous, but because I don't know, emails it's just not what I check regularly unless I send something to somebody to check over like one of my pitches or something, and they'll give me feedback on it. Yeah. I've done that at least twice so far, where I've like one was like a genuine pitch, and the other one was kind of like, you could take this as a pitch, but I really just want to have your feedback because it seems like your expertise in this field.
So, oh man, sorry, had a yawn there.
Easy for you to say. It's like what, 8 o'clock right now.
Yeah, it's about 8:30 here. Yeah,
I don't have to be up in the morning. Spring break pretty much starts tomorrow for me. And then homework is going to be pretty light, so I'm looking forward to getting some work done on my own projects and maybe catching up with some friends I haven't been able to see because of the school year.
It's actually funny that you're bringing about spring break starting next week, because it was almost exactly a year ago. It was a year ago next week that I was in DC last.
Huh.
I was down there for a youth conference. We took some kids down there.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were talking about that. Was that the last stream you had said that, or a little bit before then?
Oh, I think it was a couple of them ago. But yeah, there's a huge snowstorm that came through, and we got snowed in DC for 2 days, 2 extra days. And it was really, we're like, what are we going to do? We don't have a hotel or anything. But because of the snow, we ended up having 2 youth that weren't able to come with us that we bought plane tickets for. But because of the snow, the airline refunded us the cost of those 2 tickets because they weren't going to travel back, obviously. And because of the snow, and the rescheduling and everything, they just gave us our money back and then allowed us to reschedule the remaining 5 tickets, or 6. And so we ended up being able to use that money for the hotel. So
Worked out perfectly.
Yeah, worked out pretty good.
Yeah, winter in DC, in the DC Maryland area, can get pretty bad, especially in January.
Oh
That's
yeah,
how the snow tends to hit us.
Yeah.
Well, DC's built on a swamp, for crying out loud. What do you expect?
Figuratively and literally, yeah.
Shrek.
Yeah, metaphorically and literally. But yeah, it was actually real fun. It was real fun for me. So I was the senior staff, and so we were trying to find ways, because it was a work thing. So we're getting paid to be there. We want to try to find a way to limit our expenses. And so we took some time off in shifts, and I got to take most of Thursday as a personal day. And so my wife was back home in Scotts Bluff up here, and she was playing through Fallout 3. And so we were communicating over the cell phone, and as I was going sightseeing, she was going and doing missions in those places in the game. And so,
that's actually awesome.
So we got a tour DC together, which is
awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And when I got back, we went through the game, and I showed the kids my pictures of where all I went. So we put them up on a tablet so the kids could see the pictures of where I went in the real world, and then where it was in the game, and how they're similar or different. And so it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I was actually, speaking of Fallout, recently, I think it was like on the way to school, like I found like a playlist, because Fallout uses a bunch of old music.
Oh yeah.
So like on my way to art class last night, I was just listening to I hope those dear hearts and gentle people, and like I just was like humming that for the rest of the day, and I don't think anybody had any idea what it was. I actually like that, especially I imagine the license might be easier to, or it has to be easier to get for older music, but that kind of plays out in their favor because it's really good for the world.
Definitely.
A big part of the reason you pick that music is because it's supposed to be the future as imagined in the 50s, gone horribly wrong.
That's what I like about it, is it's pretty much like, what if we stopped developing culturally from that point forward?
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of stuck in the 50s looping, and all these amazing things that we'd see from there. They're like the future from the 50s perspective. We'd see it like mutated. There'd be nasty radiation monsters. The robots would be there, but they'd look much different than anyone ever imagined.
So Svilar, are you into the video games at all?
That is one thing I've cut out of my life. After a friend of mine broke a PlayStation 3 of mine that I had when I was moving. And I just have never replaced it since. And so, I'm missing out on a lot of certain pop culture, but at the same time, I do see it as somewhat of a positive just from a time perspective.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice when it comes to pop culture. I feel like you can really only dedicate yourself to so much. And for me, video games have been so important to me my whole life that it's not something I think I could ever cut out.
Yeah.
And definitely comics are up there now, but also, TV, I think, is one of the things that kind of falls to the wayside for me. That and sitting down to watch movies on my own without an external influence. Someone saying, "Oh, hey, do you want to watch this movie with me?"
Yeah, if I got back into it, I'd be right back into it, But it is because I think it's been since maybe 2013 that I haven't been playing video games. I've kind of just let that go and accepted that I have other hobbies that take up my time, and I'm good with them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable way to look at it. I know for my sake, I'm kind of obsessive, so I don't play a lot of video games because when I do, I spend days playing video games, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things where, for the most part, I have enough stuff on my plate where typically I'll avoid playing video games just because it gets to be so much. I started playing Fallout 4 2 years ago, and I still haven't finished it, right? And I just, the last time I played was probably 4 months ago, and I just got into the Institute, which is the halfway point of the game. just because I know who I am and I know what it'll take for me to continue to play. And I don't have that kind of time. However, recently, my wife did convince me to play through Far Cry 5, because she had played the end of the game and wanted to talk about the story, and so she encouraged me to play through that game, and I've enjoyed the heck out of that. It's a much shorter story than Fallout 4, and the world is not quite as involved either. So it's more of an action game than an RPG.
My brother enjoyed that game a fair bit, and what I think his favorite part was because it's the cult in Far Cry that's running the whole town. There was one line that my brother loved to repeat for a long time, which was "those Obama loving libtards," which is said by one of the cultists, and like we both thought it was the funniest thing.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, he did enjoy that game a fair bit. I don't know if he beat it, but he did get a fair bit into that.
Yeah, and there's some stuff you can do after you finish the story mode too. But it's a Far Cry game, so it's real weird. It's kind of like what Canadians think Americans are like, and we're not really quite like that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I also think I thought that too, that it's like a bit of kind of an outsider's stereotype looking at America. But then I also thought about it. This is like a scary religious cult. Like, have you ever heard about some of the Mormon ones out west? Like, not again, that isn't to disparage the entire Mormon church or anything like that, but there are like secular, secular as in cut off from everything else, but not secular as in religious cults that are like out in the I want to say like this Southwest, and they take entire towns, and like they have everybody lives by the rules of the cult.
Mm-hmm.
Some disturbing stuff. Like I remember, like these are like famous cases that happened. The most recent one I can think about was like over a decade ago.
Yeah, there definitely has happened in places. And one of the things that's great about the Far Cry 5 is that it would seem, and they actually caught some flack for this, because in the original setup, it seems like it's going to be a commentary about conservative flyover America and how horribly corrupting it is. But all the good characters in the game, the ones that aren't going about abusing people's property rights or their persons, or inducting people into involuntary drug-induced slavery, those guys are fairly conservative, gun-toting, tobacco-chewing rednecks too.
That's what my brother told me. Is he says it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, look at these dumb rednecks who ruined our country. And what I thought was funny is a lot of the reviews that came out at the time had bashed it for saying, look, you had a perfect opportunity to make fun of Republicans and you didn't take it. And then like all the comments were just like, good.
Yeah. It was.
People are just kind of, even people that don't really like Republicans that much, everyone's just kind of sick of it at this point.
Well, I think that comes to something we were talking about in the first hour, is about that politics in stories isn't necessarily bad. It's when it's dishonest, right? When you assume only negative motives for your political opponents, that things get really dirty.
And even
right?
if you're gonna like make them all negative, you have to kind of make their beliefs kind of go off the deep end with them, and not even just portray it's like, oh look, you're off the deep end because you think this way. Like, you have to kind of take a concept and run with it to the extreme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, like, and this is a pet peeve of mine in the whole debate, is when people say, I want to get politics out of my ex, right? Whatever it is, right? And then somebody replies, well, your ex has always been political, right? Your music, your movies, your entertainment.
Yeah, and neither of them are completely in the wrong with that, because there is like a lot of influence that political, or really socio-political themes have had on like almost everything. Like there are a couple of exceptions where I just think I can't really find politics in it being overt, but like the politics might have impacted the person making the product at the time. Maybe some circumstances of theirs led them to come up with it that were vaguely, in fact, that's a separate argument. But like direct politics, it has always been there, but it also, there's a fair bit of nuance that comes with it's an art form in of itself, is political commentary, and not many appreciate that. But I also don't feel like it's always addressed properly when people say, "I don't like these politics in my books."
Well, I think a big part of that comes down to the fact like what I was saying about it is I think that the reason we have this stupid conversation is because it is a stupid conversation because there's no resolving it, right? Because both parties are working from different definitions, and part of that is because there's a routine failure to understand what politics actually is, right? Because it's not about what party you belong to, right? Politics is the interplay of human beings in society.
Yeah, the affairs of man in a society.
The affairs of man in society. And it doesn't matter. I mean, like, everything is political. Like, Archie is a political comic, right? It's Betty versus Veronica. It's political, right? It's not politics like, who are you going to vote for in the next election and what should we do about, marginal tax rates. But it does relate to the same kinds of issues of cost versus benefit versus risk analysis, right?
Yeah, it plays a little bit more into the societal bits, is what I always thought of things like that.
And you can tell those stories, and you can be really honest about those stories. But one of the problems we have is by not keeping a consistent definition of what makes something political. And you say comics have always been political. Of course they have, right? But that doesn't mean that I need you to tell me I'm a bad person because I think that the government should spend less money on public education and more money on border security.
You didn't know that makes you a Nazi?
What?
You didn't know that?
Oh man, you were supposed to get your red armband last week, Reese.
Actually, the Nazis spent a lot of money on education because they knew if you get the kids, you get the country. I'm not interested in getting the country. I just want people to leave me the hell alone.
Like I've talked about it's kind of what got me into or kind of going on a political soul searching journey and really understanding what I believed and why I believed it was when everything in like 2016, like 2014 was like, when it kind of germinated, had these as when it started to grow in 2015 and 2016 was when it really took over everything, especially like, social media gaming websites were pretty bad, but especially comic books. I think that's been hit the hardest in my opinion. And like I would not be the same person that I am today with this or like and have that long like soul searching introspective with myself if it wasn't for Marvel pissing me off. So they effectively made an enemy out of me. And that's not saying much because it's just some random kid from Maryland, but like, they made an enemy out of me when they were trying to baptize me.
Mm-hmm. Now we're back to religious cults again.
I mean, honestly, true fits.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I was in school back in between 2007 and 2011, and it wasn't as blatant in terms of the just overt bias, but you could certainly see kind of the seeds of what ultimately is kind of the environment now.
The feelings of the writer, it was like you'd kind of see it's like, oh, this is how the writer thinks, or it kind of bleeds in a little bit here, but it's no big deal because you're just like, oh, people think like that. It's impossible not to be biased. And then now it's just like, oh no, President Hit is taking over the border with his Nazi guards.
We're gonna deal with the wage gap in India and X-Men. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and like one of the things that I want to this is once again, this is definitely the old fogey talking here, but I've been watching this spiral for decades, right? And just a little, I talked about this with Marmaduke fan a couple weeks ago. But for me, I was introduced to the concept of the political compass when I was probably 22, 23 years old, right? And one of my buddies said, hey, you should go online and take this political compass test. And I was like, okay. And I answered their little questions and I got my little results, and I didn't agree with the results because I didn't think the questions were very specific. But I took a look at
it does have loaded questions.
They do. They do. Well, and one of the things was like, do you believe, one of the specific questions that got in my craw was, do you believe that, you know, industries should be heavily regulated or not heavily regulated? And I was like, they're not asking about who's doing the regulation.
Yeah.
Right. Because, yeah, I think, like, for example, like, you know, if, you know, I eat food, if I eat a jar of peanut butter that has salmonella in it, which has happened, and I get horribly sick, which has happened, you know.
You've gotten salmonella from a peanut butter jar?
It's awful. There was some tainted peanut butter like several decades ago. I mean, not several decades, several 5-year groups, whatever that is. But it was about 10 years ago. It was awful. Twice, because I didn't know what it was. So like I had some peanut butter and I got horribly sick. And just actually may have been botulism, not salmonella. But anyway.
Neither.
It doesn't matter. It made me sick. And then I was like, I kind of got a little over it, you know, and worked through my system. And then I went on a vacation. I came back and made myself a peanut butter sandwich, and I got sick all over again. And then I'm sitting there on the floor, just being, or the bed or whatever, just being miserable. And my Amy comes to me and she says, I was like, oh, I don't feel good. And she's like, you didn't eat any of that peanut butter, did you? And I was like, well, of course I did. I got home and I'm hungry. And she said, didn't you hear there's a recall? And I was like, no.
That's how I always get panicked whenever, like last year when they had the E. coli breakout with the lettuce, and I'd be like, oh no, I didn't have any lettuce recently, did I?
Well, you'd know those bacterial infections, you'll know pretty quick.
Well, then you start like feeling, it's like, oh no, I think I could feel my stomach starting to act up, but you know, it's just your nerves.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, like I said, I think those things should be regulated by somebody, but I don't necessarily think it has to be a government agency to do it. Yep. You know, we want to make sure that, you know, we're getting a good quality product, but the Better Business Bureau exists, and it's not funded by taxpayer money. It's funded by the dues of people that want the good name of the Better Business Bureau, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a private club that makes sure that you don't get screwed in business. That doesn't seem like a bad deal to me. So I took this compass and I didn't completely agree with the results of it. And then I start looking at the scale that they give you. And they have conservative Republicans and Nazis on the same side. And I'm like, what positions do they hold in common?
That has always been my issue. Is like I don't understand that whatsoever. Like
the only position that I can find that's consistent between the National Socialist German Workers' Party and the Republican Party in any era is the existence of the nation state.
Yeah.
But that is not enough to base a political philosophy on. You know?
Yeah. For me, I've always
I mean, even the Soviets had a really large sense of national, or like they had a massive sense of national pride, to the point that they even let people die because of it. Like shipping out food when it could have gone to the citizens to make themselves look better. They're like, "Oh, look, we're doing really well. Ship out food."
Yeah,
that always bothered me. I remember reading about that in history class, that they'd ship. They would export food before giving it to other people to make it look to the other nations like, "Oh, Russia's doing really well."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or not Russia. Right? To me, it's weird to think that it went for a long time as the USSR instead of actually genuinely being called Russia.
Yeah, you're young enough to have not lived through that at all.
The funny thing is, it was kind of just a staring contest when you think about it. Like the Cold War was really more of a, because Vietnam, actively involved in Vietnam. World War II, actively involved, but the Cold War was kind of just two countries sitting at each other and say, "Hey, I'm going to blow you up. I'm going to do it."
It was kind of like that. It was kind of like that. It was
scary, though. I can imagine, especially with this first kind of, we've seen what nuclear power can do. We ourselves were the perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
And
is part of the thing to think about, if I could paint that picture, right? So I was a child when the Berlin Wall fell, right? I was 12, I think. So I remember, Reagan talking to Gorbachev about that. I remember the speech. I remember the East and West German punks tearing that damn thing down. I remember, hearing about people sneaking across, you know, uh, the whole thing. The whole thing was something, and that was just part of my childhood, right? So, thinking about how, Matt Svilar, what year were you born in, man?
89.
89. So you were an infant when all that was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, but for me, it was real, right? I mean, that was something that is a I mean, it changed the world when that happened. I can't even explain what the end of the division in Germany and the end of the USSR meant to us when we were that young. So those of us who were paying attention, I mean, not everyone was, but it was such a shift in things, and that's one thing that gets me so crazy is people that because right after that all that happened, I mean, the horror stories about what was like going on in Russia and in East Germany, and how the people were being treated and how tax dollars were being used and how it was all being filtered, all the resources being filtered into the Soviet states, the bureaucracies that were running it all. I have such a hard time when I hear young people talk about, how great socialism could be if it was just done right.
Yeah.
I'm just like, dude, yeah. But they weren't there. I mean, I wasn't there. Obviously, I was.
You haven't seen it. You haven't seen anything yet until you see the ones that tried to defend Maoist China or the USSR.
Yeah, I just can't even. Tiananmen Square. Do you guys even know what that is?
That's a scary story in of itself. And the saddest part is a lot of people think it's like, oh, look, he's standing up, and a lot of people have this misconception that he walked away alive from that.
Oh no, nobody walked away alive. All those kids were gunned down. Well, maybe that might be an exaggeration. Maybe somebody got out in the crowd. I don't know, but it was a massacre. It was a massacre live on television.
Yeah. No, the 100 million people dead. Yeah,
But yeah, when it came to the USSR collapsing, actually recently that was one of my papers I had to write for school, and when I was writing about it, I came to the realization that Gorbachev is a man so Russian that he has a birthmark in the shape of Alaska on his head.
Did you put that in your college term paper?
I didn't, but I wrote that. I wrote that down because I thought it was funny on a separate piece of paper.
It is hilariously funny, but I can't. That's so tacky.
Yeah, I would not write that on a college paper.
It's like, okay, so we homeschool my kids, right? So every once and again, they'll put something in one of their reports that's just like a joke like that they just think is the funniest thing in the world. And I was
we used to do that all the time. Like, I used to love putting jokes in all my papers, and my mom would tell me, it's like, listen, I love you, and I think this is real. I think this is really funny, but when you move on to college, you can't do stuff like this.
This will cause you to lose your grade. Don't do that.
I think there was at one point when I was like first getting into college and getting the hang of doing public schooling, and I think there was a point where I snuck in like a little joke or something like that, and they kind of gave me a warning because they knew I was homeschooled and that I wasn't quite used to things yet, but they did like knock me down, or they didn't knock me down hard, but they did underline it and say that this this isn't appropriate for this type of paper.
Oh man, I tell you what, that's crazy. It's shocking to me how much like common ground there is across like those things in homeschoolers. That just tends to be a thing.
Well, for us, it's like everyone that we know hated shoes. Nobody wanted, because you're homeschooled, you're not used to wearing them.
Well, and we actually wanted to encourage our kids to wear shoes. So.
There's actually a point that I used to brag about this when I was younger. Like, I don't have it as much now, but since I was outside and I wasn't playing with shoes on, and I did get stung by a bee once because of it, but I would walk around and I actually had calluses on my feet. So like when we walked across like hot concrete, or gravel or something like that, it wouldn't hurt my feet as much because it had toughened up from playing outside.
Yep. Yep. I did that too. When I was a kid, I was in regular school, but I just hated wearing shoes. So in the summers, I wouldn't whenever I could get away with it. But in the winter, I would because I'd be in school.
I
And
remember for a long time, like now I prefer actual shoes, but for a long time as a kid, I liked Crocs and stuff like that because you could just put them on and just as easily take them off.
yeah, my boy Taliesin's in that boat too. The other day, he was complaining about how his feet were cold and he was out in shoes, but I haven't really paid attention to what shoes they were. And of course, it's winter, right? So it's sloshy right now. We've had some snowfall the last few weeks, and he's complaining about his feet being cold. And I said, why are your feet so cold? He's like, my socks are wet. And I was like, did you step in a puddle? And he's like, no. And he's wearing a pair of those slip-on shoes. They're not Crocs, but they're like that, and they're full of holes. And I'm just like, you're cold because you're wearing stupid shoes out in the snow. And he's like, yeah, that's happening.
I think there was one point where, like, because I loved the Crocs so much, I did wear them in the winter once, but I put wool socks underneath of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get wool socks wet, they hold on to that water like no one's business.
And one of the remarkable things about wool, and this is fascinating conversation for those people out there in internet world, but one of the fascinating things about wool is that it can keep you warm even when it's wet. That's why I like it. Well, I started wearing a lot of wool when I used to do construction, because even if you got wet, it didn't matter. You were still warm. But they do stay wet. They'll stay wet for a long time.
Yeah. And they also like tighten up when they get wet. I had, and I think it was bothersome to take them off at the end of the day because I was like struggling to get them off my feet. But they are comfortable as anything.
Yeah. So we have ranged the topic of conversation from comics to movies to video games to the little bit about political theory to the philosophy of religion in the public to the nature of cults, now to woolen socks. That's a very full conversation, Mats.
That is covered.
I'm actually open to having Matt Svilar come back if he ever wants to, just to talk about things. It was pretty interesting having you on.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it has been great, actually.
This is my this is my first time doing any type of YouTube live chat thing, so a little bit nervous starting out, but yeah, no, I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
Oh man, this has been the Mattriarchy, and so that's what we kind of do every week. Definitely would love to have you back at some point. In fact, actually, this is something to think about, Mats. I am going to be on the 11th of April. My oldest boy, Donovan Michael, he is going to be at the State Science Fair and up in Lincoln, and I'm not going to be able to do the show.
Oh, that's right. So you said it was next week?
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks from now. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'll call Carl. We'll do a house party or something.
Yeah, and maybe if Carl wants to host, maybe you guys can. If Matt wants to come along, who knows? Who knows what could happen while I'm not here?
We'll plan it out.
Sure, I'd love to.
So is this goodbye then?
Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean, we're just a few minutes away. Does anybody in the chat have any questions?
Let's just give that a bit for the delay to kick in.
It's about 30 seconds. I know some weeks it's really hopping. We have a lot of people talking in, but I didn't know.
Has been saying he hasn't been able to stay up to watch just because of his uni homework, is what he calls it.
Yeah. Well, for a while,
those unicorns.
Well, he's from Manchester, so.
Oh man, there's magical unicorns in Manchester.
Yeah. I don't think that's really a thing, but he is only a matter of minutes. I don't know how many minutes, but minutes from the Scottish border, and with that, of course, the arms of Scotland do include the lion and the unicorn. So there you go. I think the arms of the king or the queen also includes the lion and unicorn, because she's also Queen of Scotland for now, anyway. We'll see how the yes votes go, but again.
Yeah, that's a kind of an interesting topic. I've seen a lot of British people talk about what's going on with Brexit right now.
What I don't understand, and this is I guess like it's probably political, but I don't understand why there are so many people that are have been in the Remain camp. I don't understand why people want to say, let's let this unelected body of Belgians tell us how to live our lives. I don't get that. It can't just be like if you're and like that's one of the big things, and maybe this is an American idea, right? But being an American, being a Nebraskan, I don't want people from Maryland to tell me what kind of car I can drive. I don't want people from Florida telling me the proper way to eat an orange. I'll eat an orange the way I want to eat an orange, and that's just part of our thing. I think that part of the American idea is this concept of individualism and the idea that I may be subject to my state, but I'll be damned if I'm going to be subject to your state. And I don't understand why those folks that are like with the whole Remain camp that are like we have to stay part of the EU, but why? I don't. Don't you be able to tell your legislators jump off?
When it comes to the topic of states, one thing I always thought was silly is that in New Jersey, you can't pump your own gas. Somebody has to come out and do it for you. And I was like, that's dumb. And then I made a friend from somebody from New Jersey. And I was like, yeah, is it true? Because I always thought that was kind of silly. And he's like, no, I miss it because it was convenient. You just sit there in your car and some guy comes out.
Yeah. Got to pay him, though.
Yeah, there is. I remember hearing something that was done for the sake of job creation, but I'm not really well educated on.
I'm not sure
laws.
Jersey, but it was a similar law in Washington. And it wasn't for job creation; it was for job retention, to make sure that people wouldn't lose their jobs when the technology changed.
Wasn't it in Portland that people were like freaking going absolutely apeshit because they were getting rid of it?
Yeah.
They thought that was going to like bring the collapse of society. Like they were scared that they were going to blow off their car because they'd never done it before.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like the technology had progressed, and no one was using the kind of pumps you would need to have an expertise to fill. So it wasn't like it even mattered. They were just like the standard automatic shut-off pumps that everyone uses because that's what's required by federal law. So it's
that shows you like the little weird echo chamber, like the fact that all of them came to the same conclusion that shit was going to hit the fan because they had to get out of their cars and put a gas pump in their cars.
Yeah. And we have a place in town that has full service on one of the pumps, right? And occasionally the bellhop will go to other ones. Now the not bellhop, the car hop, whatever you want to call them, the filling attendant. Now, the reason they have this filling attendant is because his primary job is filling propane tanks for people that come up. And you have to be licensed to fill a propane tank because if you do it wrong, you can blow yourself up. Now, I know that happened because I have a friend who had that job and blew himself up. Like, actually, that's an exaggeration, but he did cover himself entirely in liquid propane that sparked. It was a freak accident, but it's highly combustible and it takes special training to know all of the steps to go through to not cross-thread it and not hurt yourself, right? And so the companies that sell liquid propane, they make sure their people are licensed because it's an insurance liability if they don't, right? So at this gas station that sells liquid propane, their propane attendant doubles as a gas attendant. And it's a service that they have because they also have a bunch of older folks that get their gas there. It's a convenience.
Yep.
I'm not going to say I've never, taken advantage of it and tipped the guy, but it's not a need. And when I'm in a hurry, I'll jump out before he can get over there because it takes longer for him to fill it than it does for me.
Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah, no questions in the chat that I've seen so far.
Well, guys, I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug on it. It is 11 o'clock where you're at, so you guys have got a short night ahead of you. I've got a few hours yet before I call it good. But it was Matt. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
Really appreciate that. We'll definitely have to have you on again for an all Matt session. Actually, I have a buddy out here, not here in Nebraska, but the next time zone over, because we're a long state, who's also a Matt, who may be coming on in a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
So maybe we'll have to have the four Matts of the apocalypse or something. I hope.
Sounds good.
Hope there's not too much revealing. So, okay, guys. Well, we will call it today. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and hope to see you around next time.
Thanks.
Peace.